With the home team, Mississippi Farm Bureau. Travis Brown joins us. He writes for the Bryan-College Station Eagle. Talk a little about Ole Miss and Texas A&M. Travis, thanks for a few minutes of your time this afternoon. Let's start with Lane Kiffin's press conference from Monday. There was a lot of glowing praise that felt like there was some not-so-subtle subtext there as well. How was that received in Aggie land?
I mean, I think there's that little bit of I don't know if feud's the right word, a little bit of back and forth. Lane Kiffin sure likes to take some pokes at Jimbo Fisher and has for a couple of years now. I don't think he is super well received by the Aggie faithful here in Aggie land, but for us innocent bystanders, it's pretty humorous to watch the little bit of back and forth with you kind of have the representation of old school coaching and old school football and Jimbo Fisher, and you got the analytics and the everything else with Lane Kiffin, and so just the back and forth there is pretty fun to watch, but I think it's made Lane Kiffin not one of the more happily received people in Aggieland.
Travis, what's the temperature right now? And I'm not talking thermometer. I mean, I'm talking about Jimbo. I know there are a lot of people that have grown weary of it. What would, if A&M were to lose this game to Ole Miss, where does this thing go? I mean, obviously everybody in college football is talking about, the buyout's so big and A&M will come up with the money if they need to. It's a heck of a lot of money.
Yeah, I mean, $76.8 million after this year if they were to buy him out. The way I wrap my head around this question is, what's the return on investment? You're going to spend over $100 million just to get a guy to go away and bring in a new guy, and who out there right now is such a guarantee home run hire that A&M can get that you can spend $100 million on that's going to ensure you repeated trips to the college football playoff. It's just a stupid amount of money. I don't think, I mean, unless, they lose to Abilene Christian here in a couple weeks, I don't think Jimbo Fisher is losing his job this year because they have still most of that really great 2022 recruiting class coming back next year, namely Connor Wegman, who is hurt right now but is going to come back and has proven that he can be one of the SEC's best quarterbacks. And so I think that there is some thought that you will need to keep the core of the staff around, to keep continuity, to keep the majority of that class around, because they have the talent to go out and win a lot of games next year. So, if you really want to ask, yes, are people annoyed with Jimbo Fisher and some of his decisions, some of his way he does things? Yes. Do I think that when do I think that the seat will actually legitimately be hot? Look next year if there is another lackluster season and they lose to Texas. After that, then come back and circle around, because I think that's when their temperature will really legitimately be turned up on Jimbo Fisher's job.
All right, Travis, so I'm not being remotely combative when I ask this, but you said a second ago they'll have a lot of talent coming back next year. How's that different than this year and last year? I mean, this is a ridiculously talented roster.
Sure, and just another year of experience. You'll have Connor Wegman back, who's been hurt the entirety of the season, just about. That's one of the biggest X factors in all of this. You'll have the majority of your wide receiver core back, and another year of really and truly most of this has hinged around the offensive line, poor offensive line play. Another year of continuity surely wouldn't hurt for a somewhat young offensive line. So I think that experience is one thing, but I think a lot of it hinges on having Connor Wegman back and getting him through an entire football season.
Visiting with Travis Brown, covers Texas A&M at the Bryan-College Station Eagle. I look at this season for Texas A&M, and to me, there's the outlier, right? And that's the game against Miami, where they just gave up a ton. Outside of that, the defense has been pretty good this year for A&M, giving up about an average of about 20 points a game. What happened in your mind in that game against Miami?
Really poor tackling and a really, really good offensive game plan. Miami, in their scouting, believed that if you isolate A&M's defensive backs out and try to force them to open field tackle, get the ball away from that defensive front that's been so good, that they would be able to get some success, and that's exactly what they did. They tapped into a little bit of a slow gathering skill set and just in open field tackling with that defensive secondary, and were able to march down the field and score. I think more. I think as the season's gone on, they've shifted some people around in some positions in that defensive secondary, and it's shored things up a little bit more. They're a much better tackling team. I'm curious to see. I've actually had this game circled for a while to see if the defensive secondary has made improvements from really the Alabama game when they got torched by an okay passing attack. There's been passing attacks that have been better that they've seen. I think Ole Miss has a better passing attack than Alabama does. So I'm curious to see if they've improved or if it's just been a matter of they haven't really played great offenses since they've played Alabama over the last week, or at least great passing offenses.
How do you grade, Travis, the performance by Max Johnson? He's completing, just shy of 60%, 8 touchdowns, 4 picks. How has he been?
I think he would be the envy of just about any team in the SEC when it comes to having a backup quarterback. If you're going to have a starter injured, man, there's few teams that are going to have a guy as good as Max Johnson to step in there and cover the vacancy. That being said, he has been a backup the entire time he's been at A&M, and he doesn't quite have the playmaking ability that Connor Wegman had, and he's not so great at the off-platform throws. And he tends to stick with that first read, the first progression in his progression, a little bit too long sometimes, which for having an offensive line that isn't really great at pass blocking can really jeopardize things. And so he certainly has done enough to win some SEC ball games, which is a pretty good quarterback. But there are some flaws in his game, especially when it comes to holding onto the ball just a little bit too long. And then there's those plays where if you're going to sneak out a couple more wins, you're going to get yourself into the playoff conversation. Those off-platform, rolling around, making plays, kind of maybe the Johnny Manziel-esque stuff. Connor Wegman had a little bit of that in him. Max Johnson doesn't, and so you're not going to sneak a few extra yards, a few extra passes, a big play out of Max Johnson like you would Connor Wegman. So very very steady quarterback, but not somebody who's going to probably steal a game for you.
Travis, last thing for you. The combination of Evan Stewart and Anais Smith, in whichever order you want to put them, one of the better 1-2 punches at wide receiver in the SEC. Have those two been good enough, considering how skilled and how talented they are?
I think so, because I think that most of A&M's problems lie with the offensive line. And if you have poor pass blocking, there's not much receivers can do in that. I actually think that at times Bobby Petrino hasn't schemed for poor offensive line play well enough, and has called a lot of long developing plays that forces the offensive line to stay in blocking longer. They have the speed with Evan Stewart to get behind the secondary. They have the route running ability with Anais Smith to get behind the defensive secondary, but I don't know if they have the offensive line to do that regularly. I think they sometimes would be better served with a little bit more of a short passing game, especially to get Max Johnson into a rhythm. Haven't seen a whole lot of that so far this season. So I think that they're doing everything they can with what they've been given. It's just, they they can't get on the offensive line and block, and they can't call the plays. So it makes life a little bit difficult on them. But yeah, two great athletes, and especially Nia Smith is as much as he could kind of put them on his back the last couple of weeks and tried to pull them into a win.
Certainly going to be a big one on Saturday in Oxford, Texas A&M and Ole Miss at 11 o'clock on ESPN. Travis, thanks so much for your time. Great catching up, and hopefully we can talk again soon.
Sure thing. Thanks.
Travis Brown from the